The laughter was sharp enough to cut glass. It rang through the chandeliered hall like a weapon, brittle and cruel, as though each note carried poison meant to humiliate. No one expected that the ex-wife of Marcus Ellington, the billionaire whose name adorned half the hospitals and art museums in the city, would turn her venom not at him, not at the society women she usually despised, but at a trembling young black woman standing alone with her hands cradling her stomach. "Really?" Vivian drawled, her wine glass swirling like blood in her hand. "This is what the world is applauding now? A girl with nothing, carrying a child with no name, no place, no future? And you?" She leaned forward, her pearls swinging like weapons. "You actually think you belong here?" The room went silent. Even the string quartet in the corner faltered, their bows dragging awkwardly across the strings. The pregnant woman's face burned, her hands tightening protectively over her belly, as though shielding the life inside from the icy words. She had known mockery, had felt the sting of being different all her life, but never in a room so grand, never in front of eyes so calculating and cold. Marcus Ellington's throat went dry. He had chosen this evening to be flawless, his return to the spotlight after months of silence, his reunion with old friends, his chance to prove that despite rumors, despite whispers, the Ellington family was untouchable. Yet here stood Vivian, the woman he had once adored and later despised, weaponizing every ounce of her charm into ridicule. And here stood Amara, with her quiet strength, with her body carrying a child whose truth Marcus had hidden from himself for too long. From the far edge of the room, another pair of eyes burned. Daniel Ellington, Marcus's only son, stiffened at his mother's words. His chest tightened with fury and shame all tangled together. His mother's cruelty was not new, but tonight it felt unbearable because it was directed at her, at Amara, the woman who had risked everything to protect the truth. The woman who now carried a child that embodied both danger and hope. And standing at Daniel's side, holding his trembling hand, was Elijah, the boy Daniel had fought to love in secret. The boy who had taught him that truth, however dangerous, was better than living a lie. But Elijah's eyes were not on Vivian. They were locked on Marcus, the man who had always treated him with polite indifference, who had never once acknowledged what he knew, deep down, to be true. The man who had the power to end this humiliation in an instant, if only he would stand. Yet Marcus remained frozen. Vivian's laughter spread like oil across the room. "I suppose," she said, her voice rising as though the party itself were her stage. "One must admire her. She knows how to climb ladders, I'll give her that. Perhaps next she'll teach us all how to trap men who pity her. Isn't that right, Marcus?" Her words hit him like blows. Pity, trap. He had spent years shaping his legacy, his empire, his image. He had divorced Vivian because her cruelty had become unbearable, because she had mocked not just strangers but their own son, cutting Daniel down until his silence was a shield. Yet now, in front of 100 guests, she wielded the same blade against Amara. Marcus's hand tightened around his glass. He wanted to shatter it, to throw it against the marble, to drown out her voice. But the weight in his chest was not just anger. It was guilt, a guilt that had stalked him in quiet moments, in sleepless nights, in the way Daniel had avoided his eyes for years. A guilt that tonight threatened to expose him fully, because Amara's child was not some stranger's child. It was Elijah's, and Elijah was the boy his son loved, the boy Daniel had begged him to accept, the boy Marcus had dismissed with cold words, afraid of what society would say, afraid of headlines, afraid of his empire cracking. And the cruelest truth, the one he had buried so deep even he could barely face it, was that he had arranged things so Amara, Elijah's sister, would carry the child in secrecy, to hide his son's love, to hide his own fear, to maintain the illusion. Now that illusion was bleeding out under Vivian's mocking laugh. Daniel could not stay silent any longer. He stepped forward, his voice cutting through the suffocating silence. "Enough!" His hands shook, but his tone was steel. "You don't get to talk about her like that. You don't get to talk about any of us like that." Vivian's eyes snapped to him, icy and mocking. "Oh, darling boy," she cooed. still the same bleeding heart, still defending strays. She gestured toward Amara, then toward Elijah with a smirk. "Tell me, are you collecting them now?" Elijah flinched, but Daniel tightened his grip on his hand. "He's not a stray," Daniel said. His voice rose, stronger now, anger burning into clarity. "He's the person I love. And that child," he pointed toward Amara, whose tears glistened silently down her cheeks, "is his. Which makes it part of this family whether you like it or not." The hall erupted in gasps. Glasses clinked, whispers surged like waves, the glittering faces of New York's elite twisting with shock. Some eyes filled with disgust, others with pity, and just a few with quiet admiration. Vivian's laughter came again, but this time it faltered, jagged and harsh. "You can't be serious," she hissed. "You mean to tell me that this circus, this embarrassment is sanctioned by you, Marcus?" Her gaze pierced him, daring him to deny it, to crush his son's words with the weight of his authority. Marcus's heart thundered. He had always prided himself on control. But control was slipping, and in its place was something he had not allowed himself to feel in decades: fear. Fear of losing his son forever. Fear of admitting the truth. Fear of acknowledging that in trying to protect his name, he had destroyed trust. The guests leaned forward, breathless, waiting. And for the first time, Marcus realized that silence would no longer protect him. He set down his glass. His hand trembled as he rose, the room shrinking into the space between his ex-wife's sneer and his son's pleading eyes. He looked at Amara, at Elijah, at the child not yet born. And he thought of the boy Daniel had been, small and fragile, hiding from Vivian's cruel words, searching for shelter. He thought of the boy Daniel had become, braver now than Marcus had ever been. His voice cracked as he spoke, raw and halting. "The mistake wasn't theirs," he said, each word dragging from somewhere deep inside. "The mistake was mine." The room stilled. Vivian's eyes widened. "What are you saying?" Marcus's breath caught. His chest felt like stone, his throat like fire. "I tried to bury the truth," he said slowly. "I tried to control it, to shape it into something acceptable. I hurt my son. I hurt Elijah. And I asked Amara to carry a burden that was never hers to bear. I thought I was protecting us, protecting this family, but I see now I was only protecting myself from shame, from fear. That was my greatest mistake." The silence that followed was not empty. It was heavy, charged, the kind that cracks before a storm. Daniel's eyes filled, but not with the hatred Marcus had always feared, with something else, something fragile. Vivian, however, stepped forward, her voice sharp with disbelief. "You can't mean this. You're telling me you would throw away everything for this." She spat the word as though it were filth, gesturing at Elijah, at Amara, at the unborn child. Marcus turned to her, his voice no longer trembling. "For them," he said. "Yes." Her laugh came again, but this time it broke, a brittle sound with no audience. The room was no longer hers. And in that moment, as the crowd watched history bend under the weight of truth, Marcus Ellington finally understood that power did not come from wealth, nor from control. It came from the courage to face the mirror and not turn away. The guests did not know where to look. Some shifted uncomfortably, their jewels glittering as though mocking the tension in the air. A few slipped out quietly, unwilling to witness the collapse of a dynasty. Others stayed, transfixed, as though unable to believe that Marcus Ellington, the untouchable titan, was bearing himself in front of them like a man stripped of armor. For decades, Marcus had lived as an icon of success and control. Tonight, before their eyes, he became something else: fallible, flawed, human. Vivian's face burned crimson. Her smile, so polished, cracked at the edges like porcelain dropped on marble. She looked at Marcus as though he had betrayed her all over again, as though their divorce had just been signed that very moment. "You are humiliating yourself," she hissed, her voice pitched low but sharp enough for everyone to hear. "And for what? A scandal? A child born of deviance?" The word hung in the air like smoke. It struck Elijah hardest, his shoulders stiffening, his jaw tightening as though to stop himself from breaking. Daniel gripped his hand tighter, grounding him, shielding him with nothing but presence. Elijah had endured worse in whispers, but hearing it spat openly, here in this glittering hall, it cut deeper. He lowered his gaze, but Daniel lifted it back with a gentle touch under his chin. "Don't," Daniel whispered. "Don't let her win." Marcus felt the eyes of the room on him, waiting for his response. His instinct screamed to retreat, to control, to reframe. But the look on Elijah's face, the raw wound Vivian's word had carved, ignited something else. Rage. And something heavier, regret. He had let that word, and worse, control the silence of his house for years. He had let Vivian, and others like her, poison Daniel's world. No longer. He took a step forward, his voice booming now, echoing off the marble and crystal. "This is not deviance," he declared, each syllable like a hammer striking truth into stone. "This is love. This is family. And if anyone here believes otherwise, then you do not belong in this home." The gasp that rose was thunderous. A woman in a sequined gown dropped her glass, the shatter punctuating Marcus's words. A man muttered something about leaving, and several followed, but most stayed, riveted by the spectacle. Daniel stared at his father, disbelief mingling with cautious hope. Could this be real? Could the man who had turned his back for so long finally be standing with him? His chest ached with a mixture of longing and fear, afraid to believe it, afraid it might vanish like smoke. Vivian's laugh returned, sharp, manic now. "You are a fool," she spat. "Do you know what they'll write about you tomorrow? Do you know how quickly they'll tear down your empire? The Ellington name will be dirt. All because you decided to defend a boy who led your son astray and a girl who—" "Stop." The word cut through like a blade, and this time it came not from Marcus, but from Amara. Her voice trembled, but it carried, rising above the murmurs. She stepped forward, her hand still protectively cradling her stomach, her eyes blazing with a courage born of exhaustion. She had been silent too long, bearing weight that was never hers. "No more." "You don't know me?" Amara said, her voice breaking and steadying all at once. "You don't know what I've endured. You don't know the nights I've stayed awake, terrified of what bringing this child into the world would mean. Terrified of your cruelty, of your laughter, of the way you strip people down to make yourself feel taller. But you will not define me, and you will not define this child." Her words stunned the room. Even Vivian faltered, caught off guard by the young woman she had thought an easy target. Amara's tears glistened, but they did not weaken her. They sharpened her strength. "This child," she continued, pressing her palm against her belly, "is not shame. This child is love. Love between two people who refuse to be broken by people like you. And I will raise this child to know that truth, whether you laugh or not." For a moment, silence wrapped around her like a crown. Daniel felt tears spill down his cheeks, pride swelling in his chest for Amara, for her bravery. Elijah's hand shook in his, overwhelmed, but his eyes blazed with gratitude. Vivian sneered, though her voice wavered. "So eloquent, so dramatic. But words don't change reality. Reality is power, and you none of you have it." Marcus stepped closer to her, his voice low and deadly calm. "You're wrong, Vivian. Power is nothing without love. And tonight, I choose love." Her composure shattered. Her lips trembled, her eyes darting across the room for allies, for support. But where once the crowd would have backed her, now they shifted away, unwilling to be caught in her storm. She was suddenly small, a woman out of place in the empire she thought she ruled. Daniel's breath caught. For years he had dreamed of hearing his father say those words, had begged for them in silence. Tonight he had them, and yet the years of pain did not vanish. They lingered, shadows that no apology could erase in an instant. He turned to Elijah, squeezing his hand. "We have to decide what comes next," he whispered. Elijah nodded slowly, his heart pounding. "Together," he said. "Always." The guests dispersed in murmurs, some condemning, others quietly supportive. The grand hall emptied until only the family remained, the fractured pieces of their lives laid bare in the glittering wreckage of the night. Marcus sank into a chair, his face pale, his body trembling as though he had aged years in mere hours. For so long he had ruled with iron control. Now, stripped of it, he felt exposed, vulnerable. But beneath that fear was something he hadn't felt in decades. Relief. "I should have done this years ago," he said quietly. "I should have stood by you, Daniel. By both of you. I thought I was protecting you, but all I did was push you away." Daniel's eyes were wet. He wanted to forgive, to collapse into his father's arms, but the wound was too fresh. Instead, he spoke the truth. "You broke me," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Every time you looked at me and said nothing. Every time you let Mom tear me apart and stayed silent. You broke me." And Elijah had to pick up the pieces. The words sliced through Marcus, but he did not flinch. He deserved them. He bowed his head, unable to meet his son's eyes. "I know," he said, "and I will spend whatever time I have left trying to mend what I destroyed." Elijah's voice, soft but steady, filled the space. "Then start by accepting us. Not just in words tonight, but tomorrow and the day after and every day that follows. Because we are not a scandal to hide. We are his family. We are your family." Marcus looked up at Elijah, truly looked at him for the first time, not as a problem, not as an inconvenience, but as the man his son loved. And in Elijah's eyes he saw strength, kindness, defiance. The kind of man Marcus wished he had been. "I will," Marcus said. The words were simple, but they carried the weight of a vow. Vivian, unable to bear the sight, let out a bitter laugh. "Pathetic," she muttered, snatching her first stole and storming out, her heels clicking like gunshots against the marble. No one stopped her. No one followed. The door slammed, and with it, the last of her power seemed to vanish. Amara exhaled a shaky breath, sinking into a chair, exhaustion washing over her. Her body ached, her spirit frayed, but for the first time she felt something that had been denied her for months. Safety. Daniel knelt beside her, his hand resting gently on her arm. "You were incredible," he whispered. She smiled weakly. "I was terrified." "That's what makes you brave," Elijah said softly, his voice tender. He leaned down, kissing her forehead. "You've carried us all." The night ended not with applause, not with the validation of society, but with the quiet truth of a family beginning, haltingly, to heal. Later, when the hall was empty and the staff had cleared the shattered glass, Marcus stood alone at the window, staring at the city that had worshipped him and now waited to judge him. His reflection stared back, older, wearier, but perhaps finally more honest. Daniel approached quietly, his footsteps soft against the polished floor. For a long moment, father and son stood side by side, gazing out at the skyline. "I don't know if I can forgive you," Daniel said at last. Marcus swallowed hard, his throat tight. "I don't ask you to. I only ask you to let me try." Daniel's silence stretched, heavy and uncertain. Then, slowly, he placed his hand over his father's. Not forgiveness, not yet, but something. A beginning. And for Marcus Ellington, that was more than he deserved. The morning after was cruel in its clarity. Headlines screamed from every screen, every glossy magazine, every website thirsting for scandal. Billionaire Marcus Ellington denounces ex-wife, defends gay son and black partner. The Ellington legacy shattered or reborn. The world that Marcus had once controlled spun without mercy now, dissecting every syllable, every gesture of the night before. Some praised him for courage, others accused him of weakness. Investors called. Board members whispered. Yet amid the storm, Marcus felt strangely lighter, as though decades of chains had finally fallen away. Daniel, however, felt no such relief. He scrolled through article after article, his stomach twisting at the comment sections filled with vitriol. Words like disgrace, perversion, and shame burned across the screen. He shut the laptop with a snap, his breath shaking. It's everywhere, he muttered. They're tearing us apart. Elijah touched his shoulder, grounding him with quiet presence. They don't know us, he said softly. They don't matter. Daniel turned, his eyes red. Of course they matter. You think words don't matter? That's all it takes to destroy us. To destroy you. Do you know how dangerous this could get? Elijah's expression did not waver, though inside he felt the same tremor of fear. I've lived my whole life with their words, but I won't let them dictate our love. Not anymore. The conviction in Elijah's tone calmed Daniel, though the fear did not vanish. Instead it transformed into determination. He pulled Elijah closer, pressing his forehead against his. Then we fight. Together. Whatever comes. Amara watched from the armchair, her swollen belly rising beneath her dress, her hands absent-mindedly caressing the life within. She had seen enough in her 24 years to know that love, no matter how strong, could be crushed by the world if left undefended. She looked at Daniel and Elijah and saw not only lovers but soldiers in a war that never truly ended. And she wondered if her child would grow into a world any kinder than this. Marcus entered the room, his phone buzzing incessantly. His suit was immaculate as always, but his face was drawn, sleepless. The board is calling an emergency meeting, he announced. Some of them want me out. Daniel stiffened. Of course they do. You chose us over them. You chose love over profit. That terrifies them. Marcus gave a dry laugh, though his eyes carried no humor. It terrifies me too, but I will not take it back. He looked directly at Elijah, the words deliberate. I meant what I said last night. You are my family. Both of you. All three of you. Elijah blinked, stunned by the weight of that acknowledgement. For years he had felt invisible in Marcus's eyes, tolerated but never embraced. To hear it now, after so much silence, was like water in a desert. He nodded slowly, his voice barely above a whisper. Then stand by it. No matter what they do. Marcus's jaw tightened. I intend to. But even as he said it, he knew the path ahead was littered with traps. Wealth did not shield him from prejudice. It amplified it. The richer the man, the bigger the scandal. The day stretched long, each hour a battlefield. Marcus faced his board with a steadiness he did not feel. They demanded explanations, damage control, strategies to salvage their empire's image. He listened, his hands folded, his mind replaying Elijah's quiet plea. Stand by it. When at last the barrage ended, he rose. This company has always carried my name, he said, and my name will stand for truth. If you cannot accept that, then find another name to build your wealth on. Gasps rippled. Some stormed out. Others remained, grudgingly swayed by the steel in his tone. Marcus knew battles would continue, but for once he did not bend. Meanwhile, Vivian unleashed her fury in the press. She appeared on talk shows, dripping venom with every syllable, painting herself as the victim of Marcus's betrayal, warning society of the moral collapse his actions signaled. She wielded her charm like a blade, but her bitterness seeped through, leaving even her allies wary. Still, her words found eager ears among those already poisoned by hate. Daniel saw one clip late at night, his mother's smile brittle, her tone mocking as she described him as a confused boy led astray by predators. His chest clenched so hard he could hardly breathe. He turned the screen off, rage and sorrow twisting together until he thought he might break. Elijah wrapped his arms around him from behind, holding him until the storm inside calmed enough to breathe again. You are not broken, Elijah whispered fiercely. You are not confused. You are mine, and I am yours. Daniel turned, clutching Elijah's face in his hands, kissing him with a desperation that was almost painful. Their love had survived secrecy, ridicule, and silence. Now it faced the glare of the world. And yet, in that kiss, Daniel knew it would endure. Amara, lying in the next room, listened through the thin walls. Her heart ached for them, for the strength they had to summon each day. She placed her hand on her belly, whispering softly, You will know love like this. You will know courage. Weeks passed, the storm refusing to fade. Protests erupted outside Marcus's mansion, some condemning, others supporting. Media vans camped outside, their cameras hungry for glimpses of the fractured family. Marcus's empire wavered but did not collapse. His defiance had earned both enemies and unexpected allies. Civil rights groups praised his stance. Old friends distanced themselves. Invitations vanished. Yet the house itself, for all its walls of glass and marble, became less of a fortress and more of a home. One evening, as autumn winds rattled the windows, Amara went into labor. Panic tore through the mansion. The media outside caught the sirens as ambulances rushed her away. Cameras flashed, speculating wildly. Inside the hospital, however, the world fell away, leaving only the raw truth of pain and love. Daniel clutched Elijah's hand. Their fingers laced so tightly it hurt. As they waited outside the delivery room, Marcus paced, his face pale, his breath shallow. "She'll be fine," he muttered, more to himself than to anyone else. "She has to be fine." Hours stretched into eternity until at last the doctor emerged, weary but smiling. "Mother and child are healthy," she announced. Relief crashed over them all like a wave. They entered the room quietly. Amara lay exhausted but radiant, a small bundle cradled in her arms. The baby's cries were soft, new to the world, unknowing of the battles that had raged before his first breath. Daniel's eyes filled with tears as he gazed down at the tiny face. Elijah reached forward, trembling, his fingers brushing the baby's cheek. "He's perfect," Elijah whispered. Amara smiled weakly. "He is yours," she said softly, looking at Elijah. "Yours to love, yours to protect." Marcus stood at the foot of the bed, his chest heaving, his eyes burning. He saw not scandal, not threat, but miracle, a second chance. He stepped closer, his voice breaking. "Welcome home, little one," he whispered. For a moment, the world outside ceased to exist. It was only them, bound by something stronger than blood or wealth, bound by choice, by love. Yet the world was waiting. And when they left the hospital, the cameras descended like vultures. Questions shouted, flashes blinding, accusations hurled. But this time, Daniel did not hide. He stepped forward, Elijah at his side, the baby in Amara's arms, Marcus behind them. He raised his voice above the chaos. "This is my family," he declared. "And no headline, no insult, no hatred will ever change that." The crowd roared, some in support, some in fury. But Daniel did not falter. For the first time, he stood fully in the light, unashamed. And Elijah, holding his hand, knew that whatever storms lay ahead, they would face them together. That night, as the family gathered in the quiet of the mansion, Marcus looked at them, Daniel, Elijah, Amara, the baby, and felt something he had thought long dead. "Hope, perhaps," he said softly. "This is the legacy I was meant to leave, not wealth, not buildings, but love that endures." No one answered, but the silence was warm, filled with something unspoken yet undeniable. And for the first time in a long, long time, Marcus Ellington believed that maybe, just maybe, redemption was possible. Winter arrived sharp and merciless, wrapping the Ellington estate in sheets of snow. The outside world did not relent. Protesters still gathered at the gates, though their numbers ebbed and flowed. Some carried signs of support, painted with words like "love wins" and "families belong together." Others carried placards dripping with hatred. The house became a symbol in the city, either of progress or of decline, depending on who was speaking. Inside, however, life changed in quieter ways. Nights were no longer dominated by champagne galas and shallow conversations. They were filled instead with the soft cries of the newborn, the laughter of siblings navigating their new roles, the quiet moments of Marcus holding his grandson as though clinging to salvation. The mansion, once a cold museum of wealth, warmed with life. But healing was never linear. Vivian did not disappear. She filed lawsuits, contested trust funds, accused Marcus of moral incompetence. She courted the press with stories of betrayal, of being cast aside for illegitimate heirs. Her words poisoned shareholders, frightened allies, and emboldened enemies. Marcus spent sleepless nights on calls with lawyers, battling both in courtrooms and in headlines. Each battle drained him, but he refused to abandon his new stance. One evening, after a particularly brutal interview in which Vivian described Elijah as a manipulative interloper, Daniel exploded. He hurled the remote across the room, his chest heaving. "She'll never stop," he shouted. "She'll keep clawing at us until there's nothing left. How do we fight someone who thrives on hate?" Elijah picked up the shattered remote, his expression calm but tired. "By refusing to become her. Hate feeds on hate. She wants us broken, angry, ashamed. If we give her that, she wins." Daniel pressed his hands to his face, his voice muffled. "I don't know if I'm strong enough." Marcus, standing in the doorway, spoke softly. "You don't have to be strong alone. That was my mistake, thinking I could carry everything myself. Strength comes from standing together. She can't break what she didn't build." The words hung in the air, fragile but grounding. Slowly, Daniel lowered his hands, his breathing steadier. Elijah wrapped an arm around him, and together they sat, letting silence heal what words could not. As the months passed, Amara found her own voice growing louder. She appeared at community gatherings, speaking about resilience, about love beyond prejudice. She told her story not as a victim but as a survivor, her words reaching young women who had felt voiceless. Her baby became a symbol not of scandal, but of hope. People began calling him the miracle child, though Amara always laughed at that. "He's just a baby," she said, "but maybe he'll grow into something miraculous." Marcus, for all his power, felt himself a student now. He watched his children be blood and by choice teach him what it meant to live with courage. He stumbled often, his old habits clawing back, but each time he failed, Daniel and Elijah held him accountable. Slowly, the wall of silence that had defined their family crumbled. Then came the gala. It was not Marcus's idea. The board, still fractured, insisted that he host one of the old Ellington-style events to restore confidence. The press salivated at the chance. Marcus resisted, but Daniel surprised him by saying, "We should do it, but on our terms." And so, weeks later, the mansion filled again with chandeliers blazing, champagne flowing, music swelling. But this time, the guest list was different. Civil rights leaders mingled with artists, activists with entrepreneurs. The elite still came, drawn by curiosity if not support. Vivian was not invited, though her absence hung heavy in whispered speculation. Marcus stood at the center of the room, Daniel and Elijah beside him, Amara holding the baby near the stage. When the music dimmed and the crowd hushed, he took the microphone. "For decades," he began, his voice steady, "these halls have been filled with people seeking power, wealth, influence. I once believed that was what legacy meant, but I was wrong." He glanced at his son, his eyes softening. "Legacy is not built in marble or money. It is built in love, in the courage to stand by those you care for, even when the world tells you not to. Tonight, I stand with my family not as a man above reproach, but as a man who finally chose truth." The applause was uneven, some hesitant, some fervent, but it grew, rippling through the hall. Daniel squeezed Elijah's hand, tears burning in his eyes. For the first time, he saw his father not as a giant casting a shadow, but as a man willing to walk beside him. After the speech, a reporter cornered Daniel, microphone extended. "Do you believe your father has redeemed himself?" she asked. Daniel paused, his gaze drifting to Marcus laughing softly with Amara, rocking the baby in his arms. He turned back, his answer measured. "Redemption isn't a moment. It's a lifetime of choices. Last night he chose silence. Tonight he chose love. Ask me again tomorrow, and the day after, and every day that follows." The clip went viral, shared as a mantra of accountability. Some mocked it, many embraced it. For Daniel, it was not performance, it was truth. Forgiveness could not erase scars, but it could light a path forward. Weeks later, Vivian appeared once more, this time not on television but at the gates of the mansion. The press swarmed, expecting fireworks. Instead, she stood trembling, her arrogance stripped away. When Marcus finally came to meet her, she spat words of bitterness, accusations, insults, but beneath them flickered something else. Fear. Loneliness. You destroyed me, she hissed. No, Vivian, Marcus said quietly. You destroyed yourself. I only stopped helping you do it. She flinched, her fury collapsing into silence. For the first time, Marcus saw her not as a villain but as a woman consumed by her own emptiness. He did not hate her, he pitied her. And he knew pity was something she would never forgive. She turned away, vanishing into the camera's glare. Life did not become perfect after that. Hatred did not vanish, nor did prejudice dissolve. There were still battles, court cases, headlines, whispered insults on sidewalks. But there was also laughter, shared meals, nights of quiet peace. The baby grew, his eyes wide and curious, his tiny fingers curling around whoever held him. He became the heartbeat of the family, the living proof that love endured. One summer evening, as the sun dipped low, Daniel and Elijah walked through the gardens, their son toddling ahead on unsteady legs. Daniel's hand brushed Elijah's, their fingers intertwining with ease now, no longer hidden, no longer trembling. Do you think he'll grow up safe? Daniel asked quietly, watching the boy chase fireflies. Elijah's smile was soft but resolute. Not always. The world will still try to break him. But he'll have us. And that's more than we ever had. Daniel's throat tightened. He'll know love. He already does, Elijah replied, leaning in to kiss him gently, their son's laughter ringing in the air. From the terrace, Marcus watched, Amara beside him. His heart ached with pride, with regret, with hope. He whispered to Amara, I was so afraid of losing everything, but I see now I was losing it all because I didn't understand what mattered. Amara nodded, her gaze fixed on the boy running through the grass. You understand now. That's what matters. As twilight fell, the family gathered together, their shadows long against the fading light. The world outside still judged, still whispered, still raged. But within that circle, there was something stronger than any empire Marcus had built. Not perfection, not redemption complete, but love. Love that refused to be silenced. And as the boy reached for the sky, chasing fireflies with laughter in his voice, Marcus allowed himself to believe that the future, however uncertain, might yet be brighter than the past. The story of the Ellingtons was not finished, but it was no longer written by fear. It was written by love, and love at last was enough. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.